So I've already talked about the Superman movies. I will be doing the Batman movies from 1989 to 1997 in preparation for Justice League in November. But right now, I'm going to take a break and talk about Blade Runner, because we got Blade Runner 2049 coming out next week. So I think it's fair enough to talk about the original classic that started it all. Blade Runner came out in 1982, is based on the Philip K. Dick novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and it's directed by Ridley Scott and stars Harrison Ford. The movie takes place in the year of 2019. In this future, there are sophisticated machines out there called replicants that look like humans, but they live shorter lifespans than humans. And usually the replicants are used off-world for pretty much slavery. They're out there to try to colonize other worlds, other planets, but there was a rebellion on one of these off-world locations. So on Earth, replicants have become illegal. And the police force have Blade Runner units, which are pretty much sent out to retire these replicants. Pretty much they're the ones responsible for identifying a replicant and killing them, even though it's not called extermination, it's called retirement. So our main character is Rick Deckard, who's played by Harrison Ford. He is given the assignment to track down 4 replicants that have been running around in Los Angeles. And then there's another replicant, Rachel, played by Sean Young, who kind of is there to make him start to question whether or not what he's doing is actually the right thing, because he starts to grow some sort of attachment to this replicant. So it's a pretty standard science fiction film that is also laced in with several neo-noir elements, making it one of the most important science fiction movies ever made. Blade Runner has an interesting history with the movie itself and me personally. I remember seeing Blade Runner for the first time about 8 years ago. I actually don't remember which version I saw of it, and when I saw it, I didn't quite understand the movie. So I was just like, I don't get this so much, but it definitely looks pretty. And the reason I said I don't remember which version I've seen of it is because this movie is famous, or infamous, for having several different versions. There's the theatrical cut, there's the international cut, there's the director's cut, and then there's the final cut, which is usually the version of the film that everyone prefers, including Ridley Scott himself. So for this review, I watched both the theatrical cut and the final cut, because I have a lot of other retro reviews to do, and I really don't have the time to watch 4 different versions of the same movie. So how this review is going to work, I'm going to talk about just the overall movie itself, what I think of it, and then I'll save my thoughts on which version is superior near the end of the review, in terms of what's better, the theatrical cut or the final cut. So the movie itself, now that I've rewatched it and really know what's going on, I love this movie. When I was in college, I took a class on film noir. Pretty much what film noir is, it was this genre of movies that were made during the 1940s and 50s. They were usually detective films, like Double Indemnity, Sunset Boulevard, Touch of Evil. Some Hitchcock movies are even considered to be film noir. Like one of the films that I was shown in class was Strangers on a Train. These movies consisted of a lot of dark cinematography. There's a lot of mystery surrounding the plot and what's going on and where allegiances with characters are. And sometimes near the end of the movie, things don't turn out for the best. Sometimes they do, but things can also have a habit of going wrong. And that's pretty much what noir film was. Neo-noir is a movement of films that came afterwards. These are movies that were made in the modern day, or at least starting with the 70s and 80s. Going onward. One of the biggest and most memorable movies to fall into the neo-noir category while doing something fresh and new is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. But I'm not talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I'm talking about Blade Runner. It's a neo-noir film that takes all these elements from these classic noir films and blends it together with science fiction to create something fresh and original, even though the movie is based off a Philip K. Dick book. One of the biggest things that draws me to this movie is the look of it. This is probably one of the most memorable looking cities in terms of film ever. The cinematography is gorgeous. The look of Los Angeles is so powerful with so many little details that you could miss if you blink. It's one of these movies that turns the city into a character of its own. They shot at a lot of famous areas in Los Angeles, most notably Union Station, which in Blade Runner acts as the headquarters for the police department, and the Bradbury building where the big climax of the film takes place. It's really beautiful, and it really showcases the movie's strength. And with all the dark shadows and the gritty atmosphere, it lends itself to a beautiful looking neo-noir film. Music is also a really big, important factor for Blade Runner. The music here is done by Vangelis, and it sounds a lot like a very techno 80s style score, where kind of like a synthesizer score, but it also has a lot of elements with jazz in there, particularly whenever Rachel and Rick Deckard are together, because jazz also really plays a big part in the old noir films back then. So overall, the movie is at its strongest in terms of the visuals, just the overall style. The plot itself is actually pretty generic. It's not bad at all. It works very well for the kind of film this is. But the actual plot itself, with Rick Deckard trying to hunt down these replicants, at first glance, it's not too special, but it's one of those things where you gotta look into it to really appreciate the themes of this movie, like the questioning of artificial intelligence, which is pretty much what replicants are, because Rick Deckard was one of the best Blade Runners working, and in this movie, he starts to question whether what he's doing or not is correct, because the replicants are so identical to humans. This is also a world where there are mechanical owls and mechanical snakes that look so lifelike. It's one of these things just like in Ex Machina, where if we had artificial intelligence today, if we had replicants today, is it right to treat them as if they're slaves? As if they're below us just because they aren't real? Do replicants feel? Do they dream of electric sheep, as the original title of the book suggests? It makes you really think about all of this, and that particularly comes in whenever Rachel is in the movie, because she has all of these memories. She remembers so much about her childhood, yet they're just implants of someone else's memories. She's a replicant herself. But Rick Deckard, because of his relationship with Rachel, is having difficulty with his assignments trying to find the other replicants. I mean, he's got to do what he's got to do, and he ends up doing it. But he does go through several struggles. And one of the big points of interest with this movie that fans debate left and right, is Deckard himself a replicant? For my money, I say no. I know Ridley Scott pointed out that, yeah, he is a replicant. And Harrison Ford used to go on record and say, no, Rick Deckard's not a replicant, until after a while he just kind of gave up. It's just like, look, Ridley Scott can think whatever he thinks. But for my money, no. The reason I say that, again, this is my own interpretation, is because you can tell when someone's a replicant or when a being is mechanical based on their eyes. All the replicants and all the fake animals in this movie have orange glowing eyes at points, so you can easily tell that they're replicants. Watching Blade Runner twice, I never saw any of these orange eyes within Rick Deckard. I know it sounds very basic, and I'm not thinking this 100% through, but I feel like based on that little bit of evidence, Rick Deckard's not a replicant. But again, it's something that's still up for interpretation. So it very well could still be shrouded in mystery that, hey, Rick Deckard could be a more advanced replicant that doesn't show off his orange glowing eyes. So, I mean, I'll be interested to see what Blade Runner 2049 does, if it answers that question or continues to leave it vague. I hope it does the latter. So overall, I think this is a near flawless movie. It looks great, it sounds great, the actors do a great job. The only things that I really don't like about Blade Runner all have to be in the theatrical cut. And this is a perfect segue into which is better, the theatrical cut or the final cut for me. And the things that I don't like in the theatrical cut are the voiceovers done by Harrison Ford. The reason this doesn't work is because it kind of takes away the science fiction element of the movie, where you just have to discover everything on your own and just take in this world by yourself without someone explaining it. That's why the original Star Wars films worked so well, because there was nobody to explain it to you. And also, Harrison Ford just sounds bored as hell when he delivers these voiceovers. And I even read that he purposely sounded bored to try to get them removed somehow, just so they wouldn't be in the movie. I don't know the whole details, but I did hear that he was not on board with the voiceovers as well, which is something that the final cut of the movie doesn't have. And I'm so grateful for it, because it just lets you soak in more of this world than without somebody telling you what's what, how is this world treated, blah, 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 blah. The other thing I'm not a fan of in the theatrical cut is the ending. And while it's not terrible, I do love how the ending in the final cut leaves everything more vague. It plays into that film noir notion of not everything works out in the end, and if it does it really? And also, with this world being so industrial, it feels so weird that Deckard and Rachel would just go out to this forest or all this nature. It just felt out of place. To sum things up, Blade Runner is a movie that gets better the more I watch it. When I first saw it 8 years ago for the first time, I was like, I don't quite understand it, but this is good. I think I like it. Like, I had to tell myself that I liked it. It wasn't until just recently where I rewatched it, I'm like, wow, I really like this movie. And then after that, I watched the final cut a couple days later. I'm like, I love this movie. I think it's near flawless. It has some great themes to it, a beautiful look. Just get off your ass and go see it right now if you haven't. Blade Runner is one of these movies that it kind of needs repeated viewings in order for you to fully appreciate. And if you watch one version of Blade Runner, watch the final cut. And that's my review for Blade Runner. Next week, there's not going to be a retro review because I'm going to be busy working on the Batman reviews and my Halloween reviews. So the next retro review will be for Tim Burton's Batman from 1989. That's going to go up on October 11th. Go check it out. And until then, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on the movie, if and when you've seen it. What's your preferred version of Blade Runner? Tell me in the comments below. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one.